interesting that you mentioned the normalizing free trade, because there were a lot of promises at the time of how great normalizing trade relations with China would be. How has that played out?
I mean, not very well. Is the simple answer. I wrote a piece in Real World a few months ago where I sort of talked about the biotech sector, right? So what we've seen over the last 25 years there is we've sort of seen this salami slicing of the various manufacturing capabilities and research and development capabilities move to China. And now China has this incredible position in the biotech industry where not only are they sort of in control of the manufacturing, they're now doing all of the sort of research related work. And as a consequence of all of that, they've built out sort of the infrastructure layer for the entire ecosystem, right? So most people, when you hear biotech, they think pharma, right? Well, the benefit of building out the infrastructure layer is that as we sort of unlock biotech as a general purpose technology in the coming years, just like we've unlocked physics and chemistry historically, the Chinese will own that infrastructure layer. That means that as we think about coding in biology and coding in sort of DNA, not in ones and zeros, they can essentially write the operating system for biology, which is an incredibly powerful tool. So if you think about sort of dependencies, we often think about semiconductors. Well, imagine if we're totally dependent on China for API, key starting materials, or anything else that we sort of need in the bioeconomy to do biocement or other biomaterials. So it has not worked out well. My first job in Congress was actually with a senator from Michigan. If you ever talk to anyone who's familiar with the automotive industry, I remember when I first got to Congress, it was about counterfeit parts coming from China. Now we're seeing more and more pieces just come straight from China, whether it's the raw materials or the sort of intermediate goods or the sort of finished part. So it has not worked out well. And it's sort of been a boiling of the frog, right? It was happening. There were localities that it was affecting, but no one sort of took a look at it on sort of at the aggregate level. And it's a pretty dire story in my opinion.
Yeah, you know who was right about this 25 years ago? It was the anarchists who were protesting the WTO or letting China into the WTO.
We should have listened.
Yeah, if you really do a study of the China hawk phenomena, it starts with two groups: human rights, religious freedom, and American labor. Even the security folks were lagging behind. I mean, I'd like to think I was early on that in the mid 90s, particularly around the time of the Taiwan Strait crisis, 95, 96. But, they weren't the leading edge. The PLA, even when I started in the early 90s, you could argue was still recovering from the throes of the Cultural Revolution and a military that was more interested in internal security, more interested in making money, extremely corrupt, and PLA officers would own side businesses, et cetera. So really, it was human rights, religious freedom. So that's the interesting coalition of people like Nancy Pelosi and Jesse Helms at the time, and labor. And I think labor did get a lot right in terms of the move towards trade liberalization, globalization, and the fact that many elites forgot the people left behind.
Well, I think what the report really makes a good point in bringing out is that, people might hear like, oh, China's building a lot of EVs or solar panels. Who cares? But the report makes it clear this is economic warfare.
Yeah, the Commission's first recommendation is we need to sort of reorient to an economic statecraft model that modernizes our institutions across the executive branch to think about this in a more thoughtful and strategic way, and honestly, a way that is faster. Because I think I said one of the open sessions we had with the press that like the American interagency has sort of become like warring feudal states, and that's not the way we should be thinking about this. There should be a unity of command on the economic side, just like we have on the national security side. And we should be thinking about this in a more sort of deliberate way. I don't know, Randy, you got anything to pile on there?
Yeah, it's not only interstate feudal warfare, whatever, fiefdom warfare, it's within agencies. So a great deal of the responsibility for export controls belongs with our Commerce Department. Commerce Department sees itself as the entity that promotes American business, and for decades with respect to China, definitely saw themselves as a government agency that would help American businesses get started, market entry, market growth, et cetera. And then there's this sleepy part of commerce called the Bureau of Industry and Security that was trying to do what it could to have sensible export controls in place. But, and many times they get trumped by department leadership. Interestingly, we'll see what happens in the next few weeks here, but I think that tension has not gone away at all. I think there's still a fight within an agency, let alone, as Mike said, competing agencies.
Yeah, I do remember there's an AP report that came out a couple of months ago about how the Commerce Department was still promoting like U.S. companies in China to China's security services, while, the U.S. government, on the other hand, was still talking about the dangers of China's censorship and all these things. But then you had part of the Commerce Department who was saying to Chinese police departments, you should use these U.S. companies.
Yeah. Mike, you should talk about a little more on the recommendation and bringing the intelligence capabilities into this process.
Yeah, so I'll first respond to that one comment there. There is something called the Foreign Commercial Service, and they certainly do work all around the world to promote American businesses. And the Commission's not advocating for or recommending to Congress that we do sort of a full decoupling of the American and Chinese economy. I think we're just sort of saying like there's a way to do this in a way that's sort of targeted in areas of competition. So I suspect that there will always be a foreign commercial service presence in China. It's a huge market, and American businesses are going to want to operate there. I don't know how familiar you guys are with the foreign commercial service, but it's like one of the most underappreciated entities in the executive branch. They deploy to embassies all around the world and do some really incredible work. I've run into them in Africa, Latin America, Asia, and all of them are incredibly smart and incredibly capable people that often have their finger on the pulse of the economies of countries in a way that the economic section or the political section of an embassy don't necessarily have. So huge advocate for the Foreign Commercial Service. On the point Randy asked me to talk about on the intelligence community, Randy and I actually did an op-ed earlier this year where we sort of said like the export control iron curtain of the U.S. government needs to have the refresh key hit on it. And the analogy that we talked about is after 9/11, you guys will remember there was this big sort of reorganization in the executive branch in terms of sanctions and how we implement sanctions. And one of the big changes in that sort of ecosystem at the time was that we deliberately took a piece of the Treasury Department and made it a member of the intelligence community. And the reason we did that is because when you're in the intelligence community, you're able to drive requirements. I'm able to say, Randy, go collect me this information on this, go collect me information on that. When you're not in the intelligence community, it's more of like a tin cupping effort or a pretty please. And so one of the big recommendations here is that the Bureau of Industry Security, or if there's any reorganization of this, like we recommended in terms of economic statecraft, that we make sure that those export control professionals are a member of the intelligence community so that they can actually drive requirements and make sort of decisions that are based on intelligence that's coming into the government. And that will have the effect of operationalizing them in a way that we saw in the sanctions community after 9/11, which has proven to be incredibly effective. Listen, the reason that we were able to act quickly after Russia invaded Ukraine was because they were able to drive requirements, because they were able to pull intelligence. And so that's a key part of the recommendation as well.
There's a lot more of this hour-long podcast to watch. Just click below to see it at ChinaUncensored.tv. When you join us there, you can be part of my exclusive China Uncensored 50 Cent Army, where we stand up to the CCP together. The link is below.